So yeah, it's a good example of something that was cut. Originally, one of the coolest things that we'd prototype in Reach was a drivable Scarab. I was like, oh, well, why would you be driving a Scarab in this game? And then I came up with the idea of, well, maybe this is after the Covenant glassed the planet. An area is glassed, and you need to get from this location across the glassed expanse to the other side, and you're carrying some Marines.
Oh man, that sounds awesome. Yeah. That sounds so cool.
There was originally going to be a second Saber mission.
Hello, welcome back to The Infinite Show. Today I'm joined by a very special guest, somebody who has worked on such games as Condemned Criminal Origins, Halo, and Destiny. I'm joined by Niles Sankey.
Hey, yeah, thanks. Thanks for, first of all, thanks for having me on. My name is Niles Sankey, and yeah, I've been making games in the game industry since about 2000, I think is when I started. So I guess that's kind of old school, right? Is that old?
Yeah, no, I'd say so. Yeah, that's retro by now.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
Yeah, so I've been doing that for about 20-some years now. And yeah, worked at Bungie for roughly 9 years, and worked on specifically Halo Reach, and Destiny. I was focused on like mission design, experience design, that sort of thing. So yeah, and since then I left the AAA scene in roughly 2015, after we shipped Destiny. I decided that I wanted to maybe move on past AAA. So after that, I did my own games for a few years there. Shipped a couple games on. Worked on a game built a game franchise called Assemblance, and yeah, shipped that on PlayStation, Xbox, the major consoles. And yeah, that was cool for a while. And then, yeah, these days I'm working on a game called Neon Heroes, and it's actually in the Web3 space, which I hope that doesn't color it in a bad light. It's actually a pretty good game. We just had a public release and seemed to do really well.
Okay,
and it's an honest take on Web3. So we're trying to make an actual real good game, an actual game, not some sort of scheme.
Not some gambling.
And not a gambling simulator. So anyway, that's going really well. So yeah, it's been a pretty good career, I guess.
Okay, yeah. I guess probably most people watching specifically for Halo, so that'll probably be the best thing to jump right into. I guess, when did you get started at Bungie, and how?
I think back in 2006 is when I left Monolith, and after working in Condemned, we shipped that game, and then I knew a couple people at Bungie that we had worked together in the past, and actually the full story is I interviewed at Bungie during Halo 2 for an environment art position, and even though I was really more of a designer, I was good enough at environment art where I could apply. They had openings for Halo 2, so I applied for that and got an interview and got an offer. And then for some ridiculous reason, I decided that I was gonna work with some friends and go indie instead. And I mean, that was pretty young.
Idealistic.
Yeah, very idealistic. But yeah, I'd say maybe a month after I turned down the Halo 2 job, I said, thanks for the offer, but I'm gonna work on something else. And about a month after that, our situation sort of fell apart, and I was like, yeah, boy, shouldn't have turned down that job at Bungie. Maybe I can, email them and see if they'll hire me still. So I sent them an email. I was like, I know I said I wasn't interested, but I changed my mind. So, yep, let me know. And no reply. So it's like, oh shit, I guess I screwed that up. And then so I was like, well, that's all right. there's other cool games out there besides Halo. So maybe I'll head out to the Pacific Northwest, and that's why when I applied to Monolith, and was like, oh, maybe I can work on Fear. It looks awesome. And Fear was awesome, but yeah, and
Definitely.
when I interviewed there, they're like, oh, you're working on this new game called Condemned. I was like, oh, no.
Oh no.
Maybe that's cool too. I don't know. And so anyway, it ended up being a great project.
It did. It definitely did.
Yeah, it was. We were kind of like the B team at Monolith at the time. They had the A team that was working on Fear, and then they sort of spun up a second group to do Condemned, and so we were sort of considered the B team. But somehow that project, at least production itself, was only lasted a year, and we were a launch title for on the 360. And the whole time, I'd shipped a couple games at that point. I was like, I don't know, man. I don't think we're gonna be able to, at this rate, I don't think we're gonna be able to make it for the launch. And it was rough. It was rough going for a while, a lot of pressure, and somehow at the end, it worked out, and we were very proud of Condemned and what we'd done in a year. It was pretty crazy. So yeah,
it was a good game. Yeah.
Yeah, it was good. And then anyway, still had my connections at Bungie. I was like, well, for various reasons, I was looking to change jobs, and so I engaged them, or I talked to them about mission design position on Halo 3, which is honestly what more I wanted to do, rather than the environment art position I originally interviewed for. But anyway, yeah, had an interview there again and went really well, and started on we were about maybe, I don't know, 40%. They were about 40% way done with Halo 3. So, but so much of the game is sort of made in the latter half of development that it really felt like maybe 20% of it was done, at least from a mission design perspective. So yeah, I took the job there, and typically mission designers on the Halo projects, at least back then, worked on 2 missions per game, roughly.
Okay.
And so yeah, I got to work on the Storm and then Covenant level for Halo 3. And yeah, anyway, that's how I started my career there.
Which is obviously one of the most legendary levels in the game.
Pun intended.
And some people said it's perhaps one of the best just FPS levels just ever. Which is why I was like fanboying about this, but yeah.
Thank you. And I'll say that the way those levels were put together, it really, so many people were just contributed in all these different ways, and I was very fortunate to work with some very talented artists, other talented designers that were building the sandbox. Yeah, it was really those missions, and this is true of, I guess, most AAA jobs. Even as a designer, you're sort of the hub, the center of all this other crazy talent that's working around you, and sort of just trying your best to sort of lead each one of those missions with all the individual pieces that are each developed by just immensely talented people. So it was very, very fortunate to have that job. It was great.
I was about to say the Storm was the first level to have a Scarab fight as well, wasn't it, in Halo 3?
Yeah, somehow, just by, I guess, it wasn't planned or anything. That was one of the newer mission designers when I joined in Halo 3, but somehow I got 3 out of the 4 Scarab fights, and then the first one as well, which was the Storm. And so Storm was actually kind of the test bed for that piece of technology, that feature, which is really, in retrospect, I don't even think I appreciated it as much even at the time, because at the time you sort of just see the pieces come together and trying to figure out if it's going to work. But in retrospect, it's a pretty impressive piece of technology from an AI perspective, from an animation perspective, from a design perspective, and I mean from the systems design, the part that wasn't me. And then the Storm, it was the first time we had a Scarab fight in the game, and it just kind of worked. I don't know. It was. I don't remember how we developed it. I don't remember all the details, but yeah, it was a pretty cool future to work on.
Still feel like I haven't seen anything quite as impressive in an FPS game like since then. Like something like the Scarab with like, it has its own AI, it's like a platform and...
Right, and now that I think about it more, for a long time I think there was a lot of doubt in the studio as to whether that thing was gonna come together. I think it was Jamie Griesmer, the designer, sort of a well-known designer from Bungie. He was helming that feature. I think that was him from a design perspective. And for a long time, I mean, the way it usually works, a lot of times works in games, is it feels like it's broken for the majority. Like any complicated feature is just broken for most of development, and then somehow at the end, with everybody focused and working on it, it comes together. And obviously a lot of features that are complicated are just cut. That happened at Bungie as well. We had these great ideas and it's too much. It was just didn't come together. There's too much resource. But one example was, for a while we had a plan for a boat in Reach, and that was the reason we had that was because for a while, I know I'm sort of switching subjects here, but we were going to have this water technology with these giant like tidal waves, and then the boat was we sort of had it in a prototype, working in prototype, but the boat, it was kind of cool. The boat would roll around in the water and then make these huge epic jumps off the tops of these tidal waves. I think there's a video of it somewhere, but anyway, that was one that the water technology didn't work, or it was too expensive and too much resource, so they cut the water, and then the boat turned into like a boat just rolling around on flat surface of water, and they tried to sort of salvage the idea, but eventually realized it wasn't worth it, and the boat got cut. So anyway, the Scarab was one that was pretty scary for a while there, but it ended up working out pretty well. So, and then I think I had posted recently on Twitter where I said that for Reach, but this is the way I remember things, and I should caveat this whole conversation with everything I'm saying is the way I remember it, and it may not be 100% accurate since it was a while ago, but
right.
So yeah, on Reach they rewrote a lot of the core animation systems for various reasons. They wanted to get better performance out of characters, so they decided to rewrite the animation system as it applies to the characters or AI. I don't remember exactly what, but it ended up, I think this is what happened, it ended up breaking the Scarab. And so instead of having the Scarab in Reach, we unfortunately it didn't work. So those Scarabs that drop in that final mission of Reach
they're frauds.
They're frauds, yeah. They're just keyframe animated. So that's why you don't fight Scarabs in Reach, is because they were broken.
I remember so many YouTube videos when Reach came out about like how to board the Scarab, how to destroy the Scarab. I think you could destroy its shield still, like at the back, like its weak spot, but
I'm sure it recycled some of the features off the old Scarabs, but it certainly couldn't walk around with AI and do what it did before. So Reach was so ODST and Reach were basically these sort of contractual obligations, and this is from a business perspective. Bungie was trying to separate from Microsoft and become independent again, and part of the deal was shipping these last two Halo games. And so from the business perspective of the studio, they had to do what was best for the survivability of the company. And so a lot of stuff, it was basically how can we fulfill this contract in the best way possible, but in I don't want to say the cheapest, but the most economical way possible, let's say. And so yes, of course there's a lot of reuse of assets.
So going back to the Covenant, How do you think it came together so well?
I think half of that was there's really talented people working on the mission. And the other half, I don't know. I think a lot of it I didn't see it's luck, but I don't know. It for a while. I remember when I first started, some of the missions were already gray boxed, locked out. And actually, so when I inherited first the storm, it was the first half of the mission was already kind of blocked out, and the general idea for the mission was already established. And I don't know if how well it comes off. I think it comes off okay, but like the idea, they were trying to give every mission. I mean, this is sort of true of I guess the latter Halos, like Halo 3 and Reach and ODST, where they want to give each mission its sort of, signature. This is the sort of gimmick. I don't want to say gimmick, but this is the cool thing that's unique novelty, that happens in each mission. Novelty, thank you. And the novelty at least at the front half of the storm was you're going to fight on foot with the Warthog in the interior sort of driving next to you. And so anyway, I think it kind of generally works. That's why you start that mission in the passenger seat. We were really doing everything we could to nudge the player to be like, no, you should be on foot. Don't try to drive that Warthog through this interior. That's not as fun. You can do that, but that's not fun. You should just
have to get out, open the gates. Yeah,
right. And so anyway, the first half of that mission that was established. The rough geometry was built in a very rudimentary, very rough fashion, and also we sort of worked on the front half of the game first, Halo 3, and then after the designers were mostly done with those missions, we worked on the second half. And originally, the blockout that I saw for the Covenant mission, which at the time was called Alpine, was actually almost the same as the Storm, because it was the same artist who did the initial blockouts. And it was like these three sort of biome chambers separated by like structure, almost exactly like the Storm. And
okay,
I thought it was a cool way to, and there's reasons why it was built that way, and it was built that way because it was sort of a logical way to sort of build these little areas of vehicle gameplay, and then you separate it with, then you're on foot, and also the way it's laid out is from a rendering perspective, it does a good job of
like the BSP,
occluding occluding the different areas. Yeah. So I think it was just quickly blocked out. I don't think it was ever like decided like this. It has to be this way. But what you oftentimes do is you take very broad strokes when you build games, and then you flesh it out, and sometimes you throw stuff away or reinvent it, whatever. And so I looked at the Covenant blockout that was similar to the Storm, and I said, well, we already did that with the Storm. This should feel more like Silent Cartographer. And I was a big Halo fan. A lot of us were. A lot of the people that worked on Halo 2 and 3 were huge fanboys of the first game, and worked just to get the Bungie to work on Halo.
They should have hired people who hated Halo. That would have been so much better.
Oh, don't start that.
Yeah. I won't touch that one. But yeah. So anyway, I was a huge fan of both the second mission of first Halo. I called it the Flawless Cowboy because I think that's the first
title card. Yeah,
title card. Thank you. That comes up. So because you can't call it Halo, that nobody knows that's the name of the mission. But if you say it's the Halo mission, that doesn't really mean anything. So we called it the Flawless Cowboy. But anyway, I wanted to really bring that feeling back, and so I sort of pushed the design that direction, and we decided to scrap the original blockout. But for a while, it was built like it was all like this canyon. It was like this giant canyon, I remember, for a while, and there was never originally any water in the distance. That was all a drop off of sort of like wastelands. We call it wastelands. That's the Ark.
The Ark, waste.
And anyway, for a while it wasn't that good of a design, but it slowly got just, evolved. We throw different artists on it. And the other thing was, when I originally started, the spec was basically, you fight through the Alpine level, and then you fight 2 scarabs at the end, and that was all it was. You fight 2 scarabs, and in retrospect, it's kind of crazy because that's a very loaded statement. You're going to fight 2 of those scarabs for all sorts of reasons, like design-wise and performance-wise. And I think a lot of people were like, well, that's what it says, but we probably won't do that. But as me being a very ambitious, idealistic, and new to Bungie, I was like, well, yeah, it says 2 scarabs, so that's what we're doing. And then I just assumed that's what we're doing. And we found a way to somehow make it work. So typically we were given a budget. For each Halo game, it was slightly different, but you'd be given a budget of X number of AI per encounter. At any one time, I think for Halo Halo 3, I think it was something like 36 or something. I don't remember what it was. I know we increased that for Reach. Anyway, it was something like 36 AI, typically, in a typical encounter. And so you can't just throw as many AI into, like, with 100 AI, that'll be a great battle. I mean, not only would that not be fun, probably, but it just wouldn't be performant. It wouldn't run. And so we were given a budget of roughly like 36 AI. But also, the other side of the equation was each vehicle you threw into an encounter, I believe we counted as 3 AI. And so your 36 AI, if you're adding a Warthog, well, 3 of those slots are going to be taken up by that Warthog, and the Marine that drives it, and the Marine that guns as well. I think it included the pilots. I don't remember. But anyway, roughly 3 AI per vehicle. And then the Scarabs were considered like 3 vehicles. So that was like 9 AI. And it's not that there was actually 9 AI running. It's just that was the rough cost of what those objects cost to run on the CPU.
Yeah, the processing required.
Yeah, processor. But really, that was kind of how we were able to, as mission designers, run designer encounters and say, okay, you get 36 AI, use them however you want. So for the case of the 2 Scarab encounter, right off the bat, you're eating up half your budget. So what is that, like 18 AI right there, I think. And again, I think this is the correct math on this. But so you're like, okay, I had 36 AI, now I've lost 18, so I have 18 AI left. And then you're like, okay, well, we have 2 Hornets. 2 Hornets. And those are another, 6 AI. So now you're up to, that's 24 AI. So you're going to say, I have 12 left?
12, yeah.
This is where we were talking before. I was like, I don't think I'm doing the math right, because there had to have been more than 12 AI or 12, AI/vehicles beyond that. But anyway, I should sit down and do the proper math sometime and try to remember. But basically, what's going on is it's all sort of an illusion of trying to make this big battle with a very limited budget. Because then, obviously, you also could have the Scorpion, which you could take all the way down to the bottom. Still had that in the. You had the Gaussog, which you could take to the bottom. I think there was also a Mongoose in there, which you could drive to the bottom. Now, of course, if you didn't take let's say you jumped in the Scorpion back at Tower 3, I think I had the other AI drive those other vehicles down. I can't remember if I garbage clicked those. I don't think I did. But anyway, you got to account for those vehicles that the player can bring down with them. Then you had a couple Ghosts rolling around, and then you had a couple Banshees. And I remember it was a very, very difficult balancing act. And one thing I do remember is when you get to the bottom of that sort of canyon run, when right before the Scarabs drop and those two Hornets land, I do a pretty aggressive garbage collect. That means I destroy and remove all actors, all objects on that canyon run, and that's right. And I do that right before either right before the Hornets show up or right before the Scarabs show up, because I needed that budget back for all that stuff. So it's one of those parts of the job as designers that I guess most people don't think about, and hopefully, but most people, players don't need to think about it. That's sort of our job, to make that illusion sort of,
make
all that math transparent, seamless. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the illusion, it's very convincing, because if the battle feels absolutely massive, like it feels like it's this giant, huge battle. But when you actually look at the number of AI and like how the actual what was there, it's actually like a tiny skirmish. But yeah, and everything came together. It felt massive.
And I think the other little system that we love to use on Halo 3 and Reach as well were the flocks. And flocks, I think they're called flocks because they probably originally used the feature for
like those birds, right? Like the ones on Guardian that fly around, I think.
Yeah, like there's Hornets and Banshees that are constantly just fighting each other in an endless loop, and you sort of put that layer, you sort of add a layer of these flocks fighting each other, and it sort of brings when you look around, it just sort of sells that whole chaotic feeling. And I loved using the flocks. For some reason, it was just cool to watch them and just kind of having a little Star Wars battle, going in the sky. It was really cool feature.
Yeah, it was fun, and did make them feel like bigger battles. I remember them in Crow's Nest as well. Like you look at the hangar.
Yes. Yeah, I think we used them in almost every level to make the game feel a little bit bigger. The only other thing I guess I'll bring up is, originally there was another level after the Covenant, which was called Forerunner City, and it was going to be nothing but this. It was going to be all Forerunner structure, just a whole level dedicated to being in this like amazing grand Forerunner City, and that was the whole level. And towards the end of the project, and towards the end of Halo 3, we were of course running out of time. And it was time to start cutting things because we just otherwise we wouldn't be able to ship the game. So that was one of the sacrifices. We took that entire Forerunner City level and just condensed it down to that last section of the Covenant, which is where you team up with the Flood, fight down the bridge and back. So that entire level got condensed down to whatever, a 10-minute experience.
Seems like it was also kind of lucky, and there was the combination of a lot of cut levels and like the cool ideas from those. Because I think there was Guardian Forest as well, right? There was going to be focused around these like Banshees, and you do a lot of flying around there, or you had like a Hornet or something like that.
Yeah, and I think we cut, but yeah, Guardian Forest I think just became the Guardian PvP level. But yeah, it was going to be Guardian Forest. I think that's where the Hornets were originally supposed to show up. And so once we cut that, they sort of I think tried to throw those at me. I mean, because there's only a couple places those things could really go, and I think Ark or Covenant were the two contenders. And originally, yeah, that's right. Originally, the section of the level in the Covenant that was the Hornet section, originally my design was have you get into a Pelican and you fly in the back of it, like mid-mission, jump in the Pelican, fly over to that third tower, and then it dropped you off. And this was kind of cool, and I'm a little bit sad we lost this, but there was a section that was also that I had scripted where you fly in the Pelican from that beach to that third tower, but it drops you off a little bit to the side where there's some forest, and the elites all jump out. And they have their plasma swords, their energy swords, and they are just cutting through the Covenant for the brutes and grunts there, and it's kind of cool because you're just rolling through with this squad of elites, and they're just melting, slicing up the Covenant, and then you go into the third tower. But then, yeah, what happened was it was really cool, and I was like, this is kind of one of my favorite parts of this level. But yeah, then it was decided that we needed to move the Hornets into. I think it was decided it should go into the Covenant, or I guess maybe it wasn't even that. It was we were still trying to figure out where to put it, and then I was in a meeting with one of the cinematic leads and another design lead, and just doing a review, just talking about what cool shit we could do in the level. And they made the proposal, hey, why don't you put the Hornets in this section between the first and third tower? Maybe the Hornets land right in front of that first tower after you come back out. Get in that and fight your way over to third tower. And my response was, I don't think that's a good idea. I didn't want to do it for a few reasons. Wasn't even sure how we would do it. I was like, what if they try to fly the Hornets off in the wrong direction? Like, are we just gonna have these like invisible walls everywhere? Like, I don't want to do this. And I wasn't given exactly an order, but I was told, like, no, you got to do this. By one of the design leads, by Paul Bertone. He's like, no, you got to do this. And I was like, all right. He was Paul was the designer that did Assault in the Control Room, and he was one of the design leads on Halo 3. And anyway, he the more senior designers there would just help us younger guys out and try to guide us in the right direction. And so he's like, no, you got to do
guns.
Exactly. And this is where it's one of those things that I didn't want to do it, but I was like, all right, let me try to make this work. I was like, well, I don't think it's going to work at this first tower, because then you got to like have the player fly down this canyon. I don't think that's going to work. But what if when you leave that first tower, head down to the beach near Warthog? How about those things are on the beach? Maybe they pick you up on the beach, or they land on the beach. So that's what I tried, and it ended up being, it's one of those situations where I didn't want to do it, but other people had ideas that were great and ended up being arguably one of the best moments in the level. So that kind of happened a lot, that sort of situation. So yeah, that's how that happened.
I wanted to ask about Cortana or Floodship. How did that turn out the way it did?
Yeah. I think the short answer is we were completely strapped for time. I think there was originally two flood levels, and not just flood void. What was it? I forget what the level after the storm is called. There's that flood level, which is really small, and that's about the right size for a flood level, I suppose. But I think there was originally two flood levels. I'm trying to remember what the other one was. But anyway, we were running out of time. It was Paul, the designer. It was just Paul Bertone, designer. I was just had to thankfully push me into doing the Hornet section. But he had to jump on and do Cortana because we didn't have enough people. So I think he put that together really, really fast. And I think it was just one of those situations where it was so rushed that we didn't have time to maybe properly edit it, let's just say. And I think the level would have worked if it was just maybe a little shorter and maybe it wasn't so, intense
Labyrinth
with the combat. Yeah, it's that as well. So
I think everybody gets lost in it. There's like that one chamber where you get like you're getting shot by those flood from the top.
Yeah, I think it's just the way that happened was, I think it was just because it was so rushed.
For what it's worth, I'm a bit of a Cortana apologist. I actually quite enjoy that mission now. But yeah, it does feel as though it was kind of rushed slightly, like you said. And it is sandwiched between two really good missions as well, which probably doesn't help people's opinion of it all that much.
I think every Halo needs like a annoying flood mission, like there's a library and there needs to be at least one.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where I think people really, we really wanted to make it good, but it's hard to force it with the flood. They're just a tricky combatant to leverage, and I think just some editing. Like if you just trim down the combat a little bit, maybe trim the level down a little bit, less would have been more. But yeah, anyway.
So, what else did you do on Halo? Because did you work on ODST and Reach? Or?
No, ODST was was smaller than Reach, so they was super. Like ODST was a really impressive from a sort of, I guess you'd say, production perspective. Like I made a lot with very little. Huge props to that team and Paul for leading them in such an efficient way. It was really impressive. And the other thing that was unfortunate was the original price point of that game was much lower, because it's kind of, I don't want to say an add-on, because it was originally just supposed to be an add-on, Halo 3, and the team sort of knocked it out of the park by sort of making it its own thing, its own game. And what happened was it did such a good job making it its own game that I'm guessing Microsoft, I don't know who did, decided, well, we could sell this thing for full price. And it was kind of like, well, okay, but that makes it seem like it sort of gives the impression that this was a full game when it's really a smaller game. Anyway, I went on to the Reach team, and then I was the lead mission designer on Reach, and that meant I had to oversee the campaign missions. And then also I was responsible for 2 missions. I did first mission under contingency, and I did Tip of the Spear. Is that what it's called? Yeah, Tip of the Spear. Yeah, Halo Reach was very stressful, a lot of work. I was in a leadership position, and kind of like any company, the higher you get up, the higher you are in the sort of company, the more you sort of see the stress at the top. And the more that stress affects you. And Bungie always, this is my memory, but Bungie usually did a pretty good job. I know this is true in Halo 3, where the designers, the mission designers, for example, were generally shielded from a lot of the stress that went on above us. Our leads, like Paul Bertone, did a good job of protecting us from a lot of the stress that existed above, and we were just free to immerse ourselves in the job and make the missions as best we could without the stress of studio politics or budgets or anything like that. So that was great. And then when I was promoted to lead on Reach, you just start to see stress that exists at that level. And maybe some of it was self-induced, responsible, self-imposed, you're responsible for ensuring that this everything's steering the ship in the right direction. As we got to sort of this guy a lot of ideas, or broad stroke ideas for the game, whether it be the boat, yeah, which. There was a boat, and then
also driving the Scarab or something right after Alexandria.
That was. So yeah, that's it's a good example of something that was cut, kind of like the boat, where so in the beginning of Reach, we just what if this, what if that, and one of those things, for example, was the space, the saber. The idea was what's your next cool level? What experience can it bring that really makes this global battle even bigger? And so the saber mission was one of those sort of prototypes that we I had originally built and pushed to get it into the game, because a lot of people wanted to cut it. It's one of those things that I don't think I really appreciated how much work I was signing other people up to work on.
I mean, it's just like you had to implement the Hornets.
Well, yeah, the Sabres were sort of, they required a lot of custom design. The sandbox designer Sage worked. I think he worked on Crimson Skies before he came to Reach, and so I was like, "No, it's gonna be cool. The Sabre's gonna be cool." And he's like, "I don't think you understand how much work this is gonna be." I'm like, "It's fine."
It was, in fact, not fine.
Yeah, exactly. Sage was like, okay, whatever. And he was cool about it. I like Sage a lot, but that was one. The Saber Combat was one prototype that we built, and another one that was the I think it's New Alexandria, the mission where you're flying the Falcon.
The Falcon, yeah.
Yeah, you're sort of going to the three towers to and you get, and that was originally, you were going to have a mission that was all like the how do you say it, the pre-scripted, where you're sitting on the Falcon gun. I think this happens at the end of Tip of the Spear, and it happens at the end of, what's the New Alexandria mission when you first arrive at?
Exodus. When you're yes. Yeah,
you're saving
Exodus. Yeah. So at the end of Exodus, you're on the side gun. Anyway, we're gonna have a whole mission that was that. I don't know why we were gonna do that, but that was the plan for a while. And then I remember a meeting where Marcus, creative director, was like, "I don't want to have you fly around on a rail. Like, you should be able to fly this thing." And you're like, "No, is that possible? Like, an entire level where you're just flying everywhere?" So I went back to work and was like, okay, well, what would this mission be? And I was like, well, maybe you're flying around the city, and then you sort of land on these rooftops and you're evacuating, Marines or something. And so I built a little prototype level that was like, okay, and I can show people, like, here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna fly around. And I just built one single building and fly down, get out, fight a little bit, get back in, go to the next building. And anyway, that's how that got sort of initially prototyped. And then, like you brought up earlier, there was originally one of the coolest things, I thought anyway, on that we'd prototyped in Reach was a drivable Scarab. Now, of course, this was before the Scarabs broke. And so I don't remember how I did this. I'm sure I had some engineering support to test out the idea, but I was like, I'm going to drive this thing around. I think we could possess different, like, you could take control of any vehicle, and then, I don't remember. Anyway, I think I had some engineering help, and I got this thing to where you're driving around the Scarab, and then you could aim that tail gun and, shoot stuff. And I was like, why would you be driving a Scarab in this game? And then I came up with the idea of, well, maybe this is after the Covenant glassed the planet, and the whole planet is like magma, or it's all glassed, and it's, or maybe not the whole planet is glassed, but an area is glassed, and you need to get from one side of this location across the glassed expanse to the other side, and you're carrying some Marines on you. So, all right, that I'll pitch it like that. And then I put some Marines on top of the Scarab, and sort of just drove the Scarab, and then I added some phantoms that came in, the Covenant dropships, and they tried to land guys on the top of your hood to fight the Marines, but you could shoot the phantoms as they came in, and then it was really cool. Like the phantoms would explode, and then the chunks, when a phantom explodes, it spawns a bunch of debris chunks, and those debris chunks would land. Sometimes they would land on top of the Scarab and wipe out a couple of the Marines. I was like, God damn, this is fucking epic. This is awesome. And it fits into the fiction, right? You're like on the glass planet, like driving the Scarab. This is like what, is awesome. But then, as we continue to develop things, it may have been that because the Scarab was effectively broken from the changes to the systems, that may have been stake in the heart of the drivable Scarab, unfortunately. And I didn't think I captured any video of it. I wish I did, but yeah, that was that's another example of something that we built and then had to cut in the early parts of the project, and then the latter half of the project was just implementation, and that's when things got crazy and stressful.
Oh man, that sounds fucking awesome.
Yeah.
That sounds so cool.
What about the global battles? I just remember there was some GDC talk, I think on Bungie did, where they showed like stuff they'd cut. So one of them, I think, was the boat. So they showed a little bit of footage of that.
Yeah, and I think I'm the one that is giving that presentation. If I know the video you're talking about.
Possibly, yeah.
Oh, yeah, the global battles. Yeah, so, yeah, what happened with that? Because I worked on one of those. There was two sort of global battles that were shown. One was Warthog on some sand dunes and trying to present this idea of a very wide open battlefield. And then the other one was, I think, in the city. Steve, designer, artist by the name of Steve Cotton built the other one. A Scarab lands on top of a building or something and shoots you. I don't even know why we called that a feature. In that, I think when we were that video that we're referencing was, if I remember correctly, it may have been built for internal use in the studio for us to like get people excited about Reach and what we're working on. It was sort of here's what the game we're going to be making, and let everybody get excited. And I think we just reused that video for that conference. I can't even remember. It wasn't GDC. It was something in Seattle. Anyway, I think the global battles ended up just being kind of like what the game ended up being, I guess. Like, I think the tip of the spear, the Exodus level was that other example, but without the Scarab, since those were broken. But I don't. Those weren't really anything. They were just kind of trying to show that we want to make the battlefields and Reach even bigger, and we kind of maybe did. And maybe those battles weren't as big as like the some of the bigger battles that we had in Halo 3.
Okay, and there are also those like giant brutes or whatever.
I guess kind of a funny story where... So I think the way it first started, it wasn't a giant brute. It was supposed to be if I remember correctly, it was supposed to be a giant creature. Or just a giant of some kind. I'm trying to remember what the original idea was. But then it turned into this thing that was referred to as the Mule. You remember this, but in the sniper mission, what's it called? Nightfall or something? Yeah. Remember the sniper mission was, there's this weird little sequence where you see this kind of creature from like a natural animal on Reach, and I think they called it the Gueda or something like that. Do you know what I'm referring?
Yeah, the Guta or that one, yeah.
Yeah, and so this was kind of, how do I put it nicely, like it was kind of this disaster feature that took up a ton of resources because for some reason there was a desire to have the sort of life, like Reach was going to have its own like life and its own creatures and its own plants.
So in flora and fauna and all that.
Yeah, exactly. And in the first mission, they do have the ostrich, those ostriches. I forget what they're called.
The moa.
Yeah, and those are kind of neat. They kind of show up and it makes the place feel a little bit more alive, I guess. But those are okay. For a while, you could ride those. It was pretty funny. But anyway, the other thing was this Gueda, whatever it's called, but we called it the Mule, and it ended up being this huge like resource suck. Like they were trying to make it into this thing that you fought, but then it was kind of gonna be this wild animal that shows up and it sort of, I don't remember if it was in a cage or what was going on, but like it broke free and then it was like smacking the Covenant around, and then somehow it almost got turned into this almost like weird boss battle where it picks you up and then you're supposed to throw a grenade in its mouth. It was really like a lot of us, the designers, including myself, were like, I don't know why we are pursuing this feature. I don't think this thing's worth. For some reason, it wouldn't die, and I think at the end they didn't want to cut it, and we had put so much time into this thing that they're like, well, just throw it in.
Appears for like 5 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, and that thing ate up so much time and effort. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it was relatively small, but like for something that you'd think was nothing, it was kind of a funny, in retrospect, a little funny story.
Was there any other stuff that was cut that you think is worth mentioning? Or?
I'm trying to think, what else? The only other thing that comes to mind, and I'm sure there's more, but the only thing that comes to mind is there was originally going to be a second Saber mission, and it was going to be, I don't know if this was going to be a good idea or not, but this was the thinking, was that you would go back to space in the Saber, and I'm sure when people hear this, some of the more hardcore fans are gonna say like, that's not how any of this works, and that's probably true, but this is what my thinking was at the time, is you would have a second Saber mission, and you flew up to you wanted to, somehow the MAT cannons were taken offline, like the Covenant had attacked the MAT cannons, so you needed MAT cannon support in order to help the Pillar Bottom get off the planet. He had a mission where the idea, and it's always like, well, what's something that's cool to do, and then how can you wrap a story around it that fits into the game, and then eventually like the writers come in and say, well, that doesn't make sense, but here's something that's similar and change it to this. Anyway, for this mission, the idea was you got into your Saber, and then you went up to these 3 MAT cannons. There's always 3 objectives, and then you land your Saber on these things and get out and re-enable it, reactivate it, kill the Covenant that apparently are on this thing, something like that. Anyway, then the next mission was that you were gonna get back to the surface. It's the last mission. And then the Pillar Bottoms try to take off, but you have it on this huge Covenant army just closing in on the thing, including Scarabs. And then you get to take control of those MAT cannons that you just freed up in the previous mission. And then you just start raining hell down on the Covenant armies and destroying Scarabs, all that. And that's when the Pillar Bottom takes off. So anyway, that was going to be the second Saber mission. But it was one of those missions that fortunately or unfortunately, I'm not sure which, we had to cut.
So I was just going to say that's another banger idea.
Yeah, when you describe a lot of these, it seems like they're so full on, like there's so many things happening.
I feel like Halo Reach was really fun in that regard. Like I feel like we just thrown out a lot of good ideas. Like that's kind of how the George death came about, was pitch of a lot of like the original pitches for those missions were kind of, in my opinion, even cooler, but we had to sort of make compromises. But yeah, that was like, what if you hijack a Covenant ship and then you fly it into the supercarrier and you go with George and he throws you out. Anyway, that's how a lot of those ideas like came about. I guess the only other thing that comes to mind for Reach was very end of the last mission, the post-credit sequence where it's a survive mission. The story behind that is originally there was a disagreement within the development team about how to end the game, and I don't say disagreement, it's just there was two different like schools of thought, I guess you'd say. Is you had the writers, the narrative team, that wanted to end the game on you're fighting on the surface and you see the Pillar Bottom take off. It leaves you behind, and they wanted to do this for the reasons that I guess are kind of obvious in the game. It's kind of, you're left behind on the planet, but you see the pillar take off, and that's great. And then there was a whole other group of people that was like, no, you should fight to the death. And wouldn't that be an awesome way to end a Halo game? Is you fight to the death? That's what this game is. And both parties were generally right, but when we were, I guess, debating it, we saw it as, well, we want to pick one direction. Like we like this idea better. And I was on the side of fight to the death. It was because you're actually playing the game. And yeah, I remember then, one night, a group of us went out to get drinks at the bar down the street, which we did all the time, and always went there and just, talked a lot about Halo, what we were doing, what we were working on, jamming ideas, and about the boat, yeah. And anyway, this night somehow one of the artists, who was a friend of mine named Tom Dole, he was one of our lead artists on the Halo games, and he was just, I think the original idea about fighting to the death, I think I remember coming from Tom, and we were just drinking and having a good time, and we were just somehow we were just talking this idea up, and it had to happen, we have to fight to the death. That's so much cooler. The next day I went in and I was like, how functionally, logically is this going to work? And I just, built this tiny little scene to start and spawned a bunch of Covenant squads in, and then trigger the cutscene somehow. So I said, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll make the player deathless. And that was just a script command. We could just make it so the player never died. And this is usually used to just test the game. And so I'll make the player deathless, and then I will do a script call that just waits. It checks every, tick or whatever, every few ticks or whatever to determine if the player's health is at 0. And if it is, then I'll just fade out and we'll go to a cinematic. And anyway, I scripted this up and presented it, and what ended up happening, it showed really well. People were like, yeah, this is cool. And then I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was the narrative team, maybe it was Marcus, but they came up with this pitch of like, well, what if we do this? What if we have the game end the way we want it to end, with the pillar bottom taking off, and then we do the fight to the death post credits? And then that was like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. In fact, that's better. That's the superior, idea. That's a better call. And that's how that kind of happened, was two different groups disagreeing, respectfully disagreeing on how the game should end. And then, going in and just trying to sell the idea and then coming up with a better compromise. And so I think one of the other ironies that I always appreciated was, as far as I'm aware, that sequence of Survive is the only time, I think, maybe this isn't true, but I think it's the only time in the Halo series where the player's actually deathless. But they fight to the death. But technically, from a script perspective, you're deathless.
But after Reach, you went on to Destiny, and obviously there are few more issues, I think, in that.
But Destiny, God, it feels like, I think a lot of people look at the pre and post Destiny Bungie, and to a large extent, that kind of feeling existed sort of in the studio as well. Like, so after Reach, we fulfilled our contractual obligation to Microsoft. Remember, I guess we signed with Activision. I should say Bungie signed with Activision, and it was interesting because there was the ODST team, and then there was the Reach team, and those were kind of just crammed into one giant Bungie team. And I felt, in retrospect, I kind of felt like lost a little bit of culture right off the bat with that. I don't know if it was fully appreciated that those teams had developed their sort of own cultures, and it was just sort of seen as, well, the two teams, they didn't do their job, they did their job, let's move on. Because the whole time, even during ODST and Reach, like, Bungie had a team working on future R&D and future ideas. And so, they just sort of got crammed back right into the company. I got everybody was happy to say, and got everybody stuck around even immediately. There was some departures, I guess you could say. And anyway, we moved forward, and Destiny was a really cool idea. Like I remember the presentation that Jason Jones gave at the beginning of the project when we became independent. It was very cool, very cool. Jason's an amazing presenter, and very inspirational. So it was a really cool idea. I'd say the biggest sort of I guess negative factor that happened early on was the tool set, tools in general for I guess it's the Tiger engine, I guess it was called. Yeah, those are a little slow. I'm online, and the Halo games, the Halo engine, it was very designer friendly. Let's just say, like I can't speak for the other teams, but as a designer, it was an extremely effective tool. Like the Sapien editor was extremely effective, and it was the best tools easily that I ever had used in the industry. It was really good for like scripting. You needed 3D Studio Max or a 3D modeling program to actually build environments. That was kind of one thing that wasn't great about it, but as far as just scripting encounters, it was incredible. And excuse me, we remember one of my first days at Bungie on Halo 3, I remember they showed me the tools and showed me how to spawn like AI into the world. And it was kind of like you just dropped an actor, an object into the world and set a couple variables and then hit spawn. And immediately, like, there was no compile, maybe there was a compile, but it was very quick. And immediately you just had these two squads, one Covenant squad, one Marine squad fighting each other. And they almost immediately just looked like these. It was amazing. It was like these little, it was like playing G.I. Joe, like for people that are my age, like Star Wars, G.I. Joe, whatever, except the figures came alive and fought each other. And it was mind blowing. I was like, oh my God, this is the coolest job ever. I'm basically like playing G.I. Joes, and switch over to Destiny. And immediately it was like, well, the tools aren't quite ready yet. So initially we started prototyping ideas. So there was two sides of it. We were in OneNote, which is Microsoft's like documentation and whatever, a program that you can add images to and document stuff. There's a ton of OneNote work on here's some ideas. Just come up with a bunch of ideas. Start brainstorming ideas for what should be Destiny as missions. And then the other side was, well, Tiger engine isn't quite ready for prime time, so just use the Halo engine and see what we can come up with to prototype these new ideas. Long story short, I guess the way I describe it is on Halo, we had like a 6-second iterative sort of recompile loop where, let's say that you test an encounter and you're like, oh, okay, that was cool, but I need to update it. I need to change it a little bit. So I'm going to move some stuff around, recompile, try it again. 6 seconds. Basically, something like that. Very fast. Then, when we were first able to work in Tiger and Destiny, it wasn't 6 seconds anymore. Initially, it was 15 minutes to get a recompile. Yeah. And so, and then of course, it's still the tool set still,
because there were like so many like items and weapons that had to load, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but initially, the first time we tried to dip in there and make stuff, it was, I don't even want to speculate because I'm not qualified to speculate as to why, but it was long. And I don't know where things are these days. I left Bungie a while ago, almost 10 years now, but that was kind of the first, like, where things kind of weren't going the way that maybe we'd hoped that they would be going early on. So we spent a lot of those early years in documentation OneNote building documentation, and there's a lot of cool ideas, but there's only so much you can develop in documentation. So yeah, that was kind of the early days of Destiny. It's not like, Destiny is not what I ever wanted it. Like, it's not like even the kind of game that I ever was hoping we were going to make. Like, another thing about when we were building Destiny, or very early on, was there was just no coherent, as far as I could tell, no coherent, this is what the game is going to be. And so I'll say what I wanted Destiny to be, which I don't even, this is just my taste in games, but what I was hoping it was going to be was we were going to marry Halo in with like Skyrim, like it's going to be more of a Skyrim feeling where or a Bethesda, I guess, game feeling where there's a huge frontier and you can go choose your direction and go find. Oh, what I love about Bethesda games, which I assume I'm not the only one, is you can kind of you just sort of wander off into the distance
and you find stuff to do.
You find something to do, and everyone has a different story. I just absolutely love talking about, especially like Fallout 3, Oblivion, and Skyrim. Like those games, man. Like I would, be talking to other people in the studio, and we'd all had our own stories. And I was like, man, like imagine playing Skyrim, but you are playing Halo, like with Halo combat. Now it's easy to say that, right? And it's a whole
it seems like it'll be a lot harder in action, yeah.
And what I didn't like, or personally, it's just not my subjective taste, is grinding missions and like that whole MMO, whatever. Like,
yeah,
whenever that grind happens in Destiny, that's just not my thing. And this is my personal taste, and that's part of the reason why I was like, well, I think I had a good run at Bungie. I don't think I'm going to stick around. But anyway, during development, I remember debating with another designer about, I don't know, we're making Skyrim like with Halo, and what you do, here's the structure of the game. And then I went through, because so many OneNotes were written, so many documents were written because we couldn't work in the engine. And I found some OneNote page, and I was like, look, it says right here, that's what we're making. And it didn't say Skyrim, but the description was what I was imagining or what I was describing. And then this designer I'm talking to is like, well, no, I looked in OneNote and I found this page and it's totally different. And I'm just like, Jesus Christ, man. Like, I don't even think that the studio knows what games it's actually making right now. And so anyway, I think, and to be fair, it's like they were trying to sort of, in a sense, Destiny kind of reinvents sort of it's doing its own thing, and it's difficult to reinvent genre. And I'm not saying that Destiny necessarily reinvents genre, but it definitely is doing its own thing, and it's a hard road.
Yeah, I think it's closest to an MMO, but it's not really comparable to like World of Warcraft. Or
right. I think they've generally found a good spot, and like you said, it's successful, and it's just one of those things that hindsight's 2020, and like, of course, you know what Destiny is now, and we should have been able to get there a lot faster and a lot more coherently, so to speak. But getting there was very messy, and that's just I really can't, in retrospect, fault anyone, because it's very difficult to do. So anyway, it was a pretty bumpy road. Maybe a little bit too bumpy for me, because I decided I wanted to move on.
I can also ask about Condemned Criminal Origins, because you were that's kind of a cult classic. I think you said you're working on, there was an A team on Fear and that was the B team. It's kind of interesting how both teams managed to produce like a cult classic.
Yeah, the Monolith was really it was a pretty cool hit back then. Like I wasn't there before Condemned, so I wasn't working on Nolf or
like Shogo.
Shogo, yeah. Some of the people I became friends with and worked with were on those projects, and again, very talented people. But yeah, Monolith had a certain magic back in those years that and unfortunately they whatever, They still made some great stuff after that, I remember.
They made Shadow of War, didn't they?
Yes, and that was excellent. They had some great talent. I remember one of the artists that I worked with. They're sort of a hybrid designer artist. I tried so hard to get him to come to Bungie, and it's like, no, I'm happy here at Monolith. I was like, damn it. He's just an example of just super talented people.
Yeah, I think I was saying before, I described, I guess for those here, most people Halo fans, but for people who don't know what Condemned is, I described it before as it's like Harrison Ford's The Fugitive, but if he went around like killing homeless people with lead pipes.
Yeah, killing homeless people. It's funny because that's kind of the way we sort of saw the project when we were working on it. Like we liked building. We were proud of what we were making, but it is like you're kind of just going around like killing homeless people. But it works. It's a game.
Yeah. No, they're vagrants. They're what are they? They're having their mind controlled or something. There was like some.
Yeah, I think I was telling you. I think my favorite moment of ridiculousness in one of my favorite moments in Condemned is this. So this first guy you get into, that you kill, the first vagrant that you kill, it makes sense. He's threatening you, and come out. You give him ample opportunity to give himself up, and he charges at you. So you kill him. That's fair.
Yeah, self-defense.
Yeah. But then you go into the next room, and we needed to train the player how to I think kick. You could kick as well. And there's just some poor guy on the ground who's probably addicted to drugs and is having a bad trip. He's just sitting there. He's not hurting anybody. He's just in pain. And then you go up and just curb stomp him. So any kind of illusion that you're a responsible cop or anything like that, or detective, any illusion of that, goes right out the window, because you're just immediately killing an innocent guy.
It's a mean city.
Yeah. I always heard that the very first pitch for Condemned, it was before I arrived, so I heard this from somebody else, but I think it's true. The initial pitch was, imagine one day you wake up and you come out to the kitchen and you see your dog reading the newspaper. And somehow, apparently, that was one of the first pitches. Look, who knows what this game was originally? I was like, well, that sounds like a great game.
You see a dog reading the newspaper? What?
I don't know. And again, it's sort of hearsay, but it based on who told me about it and who the story was about. I'm like, yeah, that's probably what happened. So anyway, we never got that dog reading the newspaper working in game, unfortunately.
I'm still struggling to think how that relates to the game.
I know. No, exactly. That's the best part. Like, what? How does that? It sounds like something off some ridiculous movie or TV show, about making games. Like, what?
That's going to be a fun image to put into the visuals for the podcast, I reckon.
Yeah, I want to see that.
Tom reading the
Finally, the vision will be realized. I'm not exactly sure how that come. Like exactly who heard that and how it was said, but that's always what I heard was the initial elevator pitch.
I'd like to thank our guest, Niles Sankey. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on.
Yeah, thank you. This was fun, and I hope my ramblings were somewhat interesting.
We've enjoyed your stories a lot. They've been really enjoyable, really entertaining.
Yeah. Anytime you guys want to hang out and chat, always happy to talk about the industry.
For what it's worth, the Halo modding community has been scribbling down notes for the last little while, I'd imagine. Probably coming up with their own scenarios to go off those cut ideas.
Great! I'm just looking forward to seeing that dog reading the newspaper in the next Halo mods.
Not the scarab walking across the lava, the dog reading the newspaper. Nice little chat. I know I didn't say an awful lot, but that's because I was just very intently listening to a lot of this because obviously grew up playing Halo 3 and Halo Reach, and so to get the opportunity to hear, a different perspective about how they were made is always very interesting. So thank you very much, Niles. It was much appreciated.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.